In a small farming community with a population of around 18,000, God chose to work a work. Today, we see its fruit of 50 years through the many "but God" moments Nampa Christian has experienced. The story began in the late 50s and early 60s when 3 Christian schools, College High, Boulevard Christian, and the Nampa Mennonite School, were experiencing strenuous financial times. These 3 schools, with different denominational backgrounds, came together, agreeing it would be better to unite than to perish. They would unite under the banner of Nampa Christian Schools Foundation, with the mission to be a non-denominational, biblically based school with a common goal to prepare students for a lifetime of faithfulness to Christ.
My dad was a very generous, God-loving man. He was always interested in furthering the kingdom of God. And so when they approached him about a Christian school, he wanted to donate that land. And then in 1959, in May, he had a stroke. And my brothers brought him the papers to sign so that he could donate that land. And he signed the paperwork the day before he died.
The 3 schools had united, and God had provided the land. Then the Army barracks used for College High was moved over from Northwest Nazarene College to the Orchard location. But, as in any birth, the critical moments of survival came instantly, and the school experienced financial difficulties early.
In those times, the money was extremely tight. The 64 was such a touch and go that fall because they didn't know whether they could open it.
The Farwell family that mortgaged their farm. If this family would not have donated their farm, mortgaged their farm, we would not be where we were today, but God came through.
They would give food for the family's teachers so that they could eat because they didn't have enough money in which to pay their salaries. And they'd make sure that they had food coming in so they at least got to eat.
The school was stressed by its lack of facilities and 3 different campus locations, which spanned from one end of the city to the other.
I did 3rd and 4th grade at Boulevard Christian. That's on Ustick, out in very, very tiny, small 4-room schoolhouse.
Junior high was at the Mennonite school. That was over on North Side.
One of our priorities was to try to get the gym started.
It would take the greater part of the decade to add the much-needed gym, but God provided the financial means through individuals who were willing to make the sacrifice. The 1968 basketball team would be the first to call it home court.
We were so thrilled with that gymnasium. It was something that we could have our own graduation exercises.
What really sticks out in my mind was the class of the people who built the school or laid the foundation. They were tough people. They weren't calloused, but they were focused on a goal, and I think that was what sustained Nampa Christian Schools.
Nampa Christian Schools had persevered through its first decade, establishing a solid foundation. The 70s would usher in a series of events that continued to demonstrate "but God" moments. Prior to the 70s, the auction had humble beginnings. During the 60s, it was known as a rummage sale, and then a symbolic shift took place at the turn of the decade. From the early 70s on, the auction would become a viable financial resource for the school. The latter part of the decade, the campus still stretched across Nampa, and the elementary grades had outgrown the Boulevard Christian building. But God would pave the way for what was needed.
We got $150,000 from the Samaritan Hospital Fund.
During that time, we were able to sell the Boulevard School, which allowed paying off a big debt. We developed a bond program, which people from the school was able to put their money in and earn interest.
The need was there, and God would provide above and beyond what anyone would think possible when the elementary building would be completed with no debt. The Lord had orchestrated the financial windfall and again used the willing hearts of the people, strengthening the unity of the school.
It's so stressful, I can't even tell you. You can't pay the teachers.
Cindy went to the board and said, you know what, we're not gonna be able to make we're not gonna be able to make payroll. And, you know, like everybody like, whoa, what do you mean you're not gonna be able to?
They were gonna borrow $200,000 to get through the school year, sell the bonds, which had no security at all. You're broke. We couldn't pay the teachers. And by the time Lowell got that all put together, the bonds were all sold.
Times may have been tough, but the school focused its energy on advancing the threshold of quality academics. Nampa Christian raised its academic standards by adopting the Abeka curriculum. Nampa Christian increased its extracurricular activities with the addition of drama and female athletic teams. Nampa Christian had endured through a second grueling decade, and like the 60s, the zeal to support Nampa Christian in hard times would soon be rewarded with prosperous times during the 90s.
When we built the extra wing on the elementary is when our school really took off.
I saw in those 6 years a growth from 350 kids to 710.
The rapid growth brought about the necessity to bring on more staff. God would provide in that aspect as well with the addition of several familiar individuals who still serve today. Resulting from the revitalization of the 90s, the school continued to see such tremendous growth that the Orchard campus facilities were soon crowded. The NCS board had a vision to see yet another but God moment with the turn of the decade.
We knew that we had a solid support to build a new school, and we were really excited about the new school. We built it at a time the economy was clipping, but we had to finish 40% more of the school than we anticipated.
The timing of the campaign, and if you really want to see the Lord's hand in it, I mean, the economy was booming, land values are going up, people were selling property. That's when we started our capital campaign. An ideal time. If we would have started it a year and a half later, if we would have drug our feet and not got there, it'd have been a totally different ballgame. Because nobody would have thought, 2 years later that the economy's going to be in the dump and land's going to be worth about, 10% what it was.
With a recent increase in enrollment, God is continuing to work. However, we are faced with a balloon payment of $600,000 that is due soon.
So this investment to reduce our debt is really an investment in the future, so we can go on to our strategic plan of expanding the facilities in the new high school location, upgrading some of the buildings at the Orchard campus or the elementary campus. So we're excited about that 20-year plan, but we know our first step to implement that 20-year plan is working the debt down.
On the other side of every trial and every test, the Lord has opened the windows of heaven, pouring out His blessings on this school. We can look to the past and see that God has always gone before us, leading the way. Now is a time that God is proving to us again that we will be assured that He will continue to provide. God has recently provided such an answer by sending several anonymous donors who have sacrificially committed to this need, by matching dollar for dollar up to $1 million of your donations. If donors fill in the middle of the fundraising pyramid and we receive $580,000 of pledge commitments and $300,000 of pledge payments by June 1, the matching fund donors will provide $300,000 to achieve the first payment of $600,000. We have seen through the past 50 years how God has provided through significant but ordinary individuals. Will you prayerfully consider supporting Nampa Christian Schools in an ordinary but significant way?
We know that the grandchildren and the children at Nampa Christian School is going to be our future. They are going to be in control of things when Joyce and I aren't around if the Lord tarries.
Yeah, the teachers are really nice, and they always kind of put it into a Christian perspective. because they're trying to help you and they're trying to put it into a Christian way of how you learn.
I really like it here a lot better. Like at my old school, I never looked forward to going to school. I always looked forward to coming home, and I always looked forward to the weekends, and I would always be grumpy when the weekends were over because I didn't like school.
I like how supportive that we are in sports. We're always cheering each other on and always bringing each other up, and that's one of my favorite things about it.
The very first day I took my son there, I was sold on Nampa Christian. It was like, wow, this is the place to be.
Trust in the Lord, commit to the Christian education, and the Lord will provide. You don't always know how. The parents who didn't send their kids to Christian education had no more money than the parents who did. It's not like, well, if I didn't pay that tuition, I would have $10,000 extra. Because the Lord only provided what you needed. When you made that commitment, the Lord provided a way to pay for it, and if you didn't make the commitment, He didn't give you the extra money either.
I think there's been so many faculty, staff, parents, families that have sacrificially supported Nampa Christian schools.
Because so many have served unselfishly to make the future brighter, it is hard to make an attempt to recognize each one. So please accept this thank you from those that are most touched by your sacrifices.
Well, one thing I'm convinced of is if you're unwilling to give away money, you'll never have it. I don't know how it all works, but my theory is you should prepare to give. So if something like this comes up, you can give it cheerfully because you've set it aside and you had it ready and you were just waiting for God to give you the opportunity.
That's what this is about. We're in a but God moment that we know that this is beyond man's answer. But God will come through. I just believe that.